How's it going, guys? Coach Bronson here, and this interview with Dr. Stephen Hussey is fantastic. We go over insulin resistance, type 1, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular, heart health. We talk about fat, cholesterol, triglycerides. We get into a lot of different topics about a lot of different areas that have to do with biology, physiology, and how nutrition and even activity, because we talk about moving your joints, moving your body. We cover a lot of different things. It's a real honor to have Dr. Hussey on the program. He's written a couple books. He's been around for a long time. You're going to want to listen, take notes, and share this information. Let's get to it. All right. Dr. Stephen Hussey, how are you today?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Thanks for being on today. You've been around for a while. I think you've been a name that, I've only been doing the keto carnivore thing for about 4 years. And I think your name has kind of always been around as far as I've been doing it to kind of get information from. So it's an honor to have you here. And I met you at KetoCon, which I didn't know that you were going to be there at first. And then I saw you and I was like, wait, I know that guy. And then come to find out that you're just like a couple hours away.
Yeah.
We're both on the East Coast. Get some stuff going on. We got to get some stuff going on up here in the Mid-Atlantic.
That's right. Yeah, we gotta start local, right?
Absolutely. So could you tell us a little bit? So you're a chiropractor. You have a lot of experience. Obviously, I think just real quick, chiropractic gets a bad rap. I know there's a lot of people that are in and out and whatever else. I love it. If I could afford to go to a chiropractor like once a week for the rest of my life, I would do it. But I think a lot of people don't understand how much you actually have to learn about the body to be a chiropractor. Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into that I think applies into the other places that you kind of dug into and started researching and going into it. I think you have a much better base than I think a lot of other people do. So just tell us a little bit about, a little bit about chiropractic, because I think that is something that from the fitness perspective of what I do, there are some aspects of chiropractic that I really think could benefit a lot of people in transitioning to making fitness part of their lifestyle, right? Learning how to move properly, learning how to correct movement, learning how to, if I'm having issues with things, because often when we don't move, we don't know we have a problem. And then when we start moving, then we find out we have a problem. And it's like, well, crap, I need to get this fixed. Where do I go? And then you would be someone that could help with that. So outside of all the nutrition and the other stuff we're going to talk about with, cholesterol and alcohol and keto and all these other things, I think there's another practical aspect of just getting people to move properly that you can address as well. So tell us a little bit about chiropractic, and then we can go into your background with the cholesterol stuff, being you're a type 1 diabetic, insulin resistance, keto, and all the other things we'll talk about today.
Yeah. Well, I do know why chiropractors get a bad rap, and it's because of them. It's because some of them are maybe not the best at running a business or whatever, but that's pretty much the bottom line. I mean, you can find that anywhere. There's mechanics who aren't good at running a business. There's doctors who aren't good at running a business. So yeah, but as far as like training, I don't know if people realize, but a chiropractor is a medical professional who goes through 4 years of quote unquote medical school. I went to school in Portland, Oregon, and Portland is one of few places in the world that has all 4 of the medical type schools in one place. So they have a medical school in OHSU. They have chiropractic school in Western States. They have a naturopathic school in the National College of Naturopathic Medicine, and they have Oriental Medicine School. And so when I was there was a group that would meet. So students were encouraged to go to these monthly meetings from, in between the schools and meet and talk to each other,
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And so actually one of my best friends in chiropractic school, she was dating a medical student. And they're now married. And so, I got to know a lot of the medical students, and, the first 2 years, we learned the exact same thing. We learned literally every single thing that they were learning in medical school, like all the basic science, all the anatomy, physiology. radiology, biochemistry, histology, whatever you want. Like we learned all of the same stuff. And then after that, it kind of branched out. In chiropractic, we go more neuromusculoskeletal type things, orthopedics, and then we start to learn adjust, whereas they went more pharmaceutical, and the naturopaths went more herbal and, natural remedies and things like that. So it was just, that's where the variation happened. But yeah, I mean, we literally learn the same exact stuff.
Something you just said there actually kind of another difference, I think, and you can tell me if I'm totally wrong, but from my experience with chiropractic is that chiropractors have a mindset that's more about getting things to work properly, as opposed to giving a drug or here's a remedy to something that's broken.
Yeah.
And
so
instead of trying to get to root cause, it's more about alleviating a symptom as opposed to fixing the problem.
Yeah. And I think that, so this philosophy of chiropractic is, remove the things that harm the body and let the body heal itself. And I like that philosophy. However, I think some chiropractors take it too far. And they say that, yes, this adjustment will fix everything. And there's not many of those left. And I'm not like bashing on chiropractic, because there's lots of great chiropractors out there, but sometimes that's all they know. And so that's what they do. And that's great. It's way conservative treatment. It's way less harmful than anything else you would do. Or it's not going to be harmful. There's really no harm to it, to getting an adjustment. But yeah, so with chiropractic, a true like neuromusculoskeletal chiropractor is looking at function of the nervous system, and joint motion and health of the joints. And that happens to alleviate pain. So chiropractors are known to treat pain. But that's just because we're correcting the nervous system and helping it function optimally, by communicating signals from the brain to the body. And we're increasing joint motion, which is very, very important, because joints don't have a direct blood supply. They rely on motion to get fluid in and out of them, like a sponge, to get nutrients and stay healthy. So if your joints are not moving, or if you're not moving your joints through full range of motion every day, then those joints are suffering.
I did not pay you to say that.
those joints are suffering, and over time they're going to break down because they're not getting the nutrients they need. And so with chiropractic, I can put instant motion in that joint, but then we've got to train it to stay that way. So that's how I practice. As I say, I want to create motion in your joints, and then we're going to train you to have the correct structure of your spine. Because you'd be surprised what I see on x-rays when they come in, they walk in the door, like how messed up people's structure is because of what we have, society has us doing, So yeah, but it's not just motion either. And so that comes to the nutrition part of things, which is why I'm really into nutrition, because, insulin resistance has been shown to cause joint degeneration, because insulin is the hormone of growth and repair. And if your body needs growth and repair from damage that's happened, and you're getting poor insulin signaling, then that stuff's not, the repair is not happening. So direct correlation between, insulin resistance, and joint degeneration. And Sean Baker has been a big, speaking out about that, like, cause he's an orthopedic surgeon. So yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So let's talk about insulin resistance. You have a little bit of firsthand knowledge. So I was looking at your bio, it's, you're a T1, which is obviously a little different than T2, but there's some similarities. How old were you when you found out that you were T1?
I was 9 years old.
Okay. And then tell us about that. Like, what was that process, and what have you had to go through to get where you are now, where I'm assuming it's managed and things are pretty good?
Well, before I was diagnosed with type 1, I had a lot of inflammatory conditions. I had like IBS. I used to have terrible allergies. I had asthma. I used to break out in hives all over my body for no apparent reason. Just a lot of inflammation in my body that was just running rampant. A lot of gut issues. So, that's where that stems from. But eventually I was diagnosed with autoimmune type 1 diabetes. My body was so inflamed, it attacked itself. It attacked the cells that make insulin. So now I no longer make insulin, which is different from a type 2 diabetic. A type 2 still makes insulin, but they don't respond to it.
Right.
Whereas I just don't make it. So I have to inject myself with insulin. And so, at first my parents and I were just kind of thrown into Western medicine and relying on Western medicine to help me manage these conditions. But it wasn't until I started, figuring out that the way I lived my life had an impact on how well I could manage these conditions and get rid of all of them, except for type 1 diabetes, which is like collateral damage from that inflammation. But yeah, all the other stuff is gone. And because of just lifestyle change, which at the time when I started figuring that out, I thought it was interesting that no doctor ever told me that along the way. And so that I started looking into my things myself. And so I had that mentality going through to get my medical education.
Right.
But yeah, there's lots of trial and error, but it wasn't until, like I did more like a paleo type diet, but still had like healthy carbs in it, that I really saw big differences. But then, yeah, like low carb keto was a huge game changer, because it's really hard to be a pancreas. It's hard to try and be a pancreas and predict when blood sugar is going to go up. And then like, 2-3 years ago, I got a CGM, which was also a game changer. So it's like all these things I've kind of discovered along the way, that have really helped, because that gives you direct feedback and instant feedback. So it's much easier to try and be a pancreas if you have that. So yeah, but low carb diets are extremely useful in my case. I'm a proponent of, metabolic health is the end goal, and to not be dogmatic about any certain type of diet. If that diet is getting you metabolic health and providing you with all the nutrition that your body needs, then that's a good diet.
Let me ask you a question. Because I've never thought to ask anybody this. You're going to be my guinea pig. How do you define metabolic health?
I guess, like in a layperson's term, I'd say the ability of your body to metabolize the food you eat in a way that doesn't harm you.
Ooh, okay.
Cool. But from a more scientific or clinical point of view, I'd say the ability of your body to go back and forth between burning fat and carbohydrates readily.
Okay.
Or I guess I should say glucose and fatty acids regularly.
Yeah.
Or ketones. So it's the ability to have that switch and be able to do that. So, and I define health as the ability of the body to adapt to whatever situation it's put in, for the most part.
Okay.
Obviously there's some situations you're not going to be able to adapt to.
Yeah.
and that's what we call death.
Yeah.
But yeah, so resilience and health is created when your body is able to adapt to situations. So can I go from sedentary to a dead sprint, and can my body handle that? Because if lots of people tried to do that, their body couldn't handle it. Can I go from, being in a state of burning glucose to burning fatty acids overnight? Can I do that just by fasting? That's metabolic flexibility. That's the ability to adapt. Can I withstand a stress? Is my stress response healthy enough that I can adapt to a stress, overcome the stress, and then go back to normal? Those things, that's health. So
I like it.
So that's what metabolic flexibility is. That's one.
I like it. You're basically saying the same thing that I say. It's cool how words saying things differently, but kind of saying the same thing, right? I talk about metabolic flexibility being two things. One, being able to process fuels differently and well, and then the other one being able to utilize them differently and well. So when I look at metabolic flexibility, I'm looking at 3 metabolic pathways and being able to switch between, I'm lifting something heavy, I'm lifting something fast, I'm doing something for a long period of time. Am I burning fat? Am I burning ATP, like, phosphogene system, and going back and forth? So yeah, it's that combination of fitness and health, or fitness and health. What we consider to be health when we think about all of the markers that a doctor would give us. But then when we think about fitness and what we do at the gym, they're really all connected.
Yeah.
Right. If my blood pressure is good, I'm fit. I'm probably more fit than the average person. If my muscle tone is good, I'm probably more healthy than the other person. They're all the same thing. It's all your metabolism, right? I like to define metabolism as the general function of your whole body.
Yeah.
Are you working the way you're supposed to work?
Yeah. Well, I think like the official definition of metabolism is like the biological processes needed to sustain life.
Yeah. There you go.
So
yep. Good to go there.
That's
cool.
It.
So you manage. So I've had a couple of clients that are T1. And obviously, like you said, that's not something that can be cured. So they'll always need to have some insulin, but the things that they've had to do to manage their lifestyle, the stress that the T1 has caused has definitely gone down, right? The amount of insulin that they have to inject has gone down. Their ability to exercise and do these things without feeling like they're going to crash or completely whatever, or go the wrong direction, is mostly alleviated. So that's something that you found as well?
For me and how I manage it.
Yeah.
I just remember getting, a message when I was younger of eat whatever you want and just give yourself more insulin for it. I literally got a little booklet that listed every single item on a fast food menu and how many carbohydrates it had.
Okay.
Because that's all I needed to know as a type 1 is just how many carbs are there, so you know how much insulin to give yourself.
Wow.
There was never any, hey, let's not eat foods that require a lot of insulin because that makes it easier. It was always just, but I've grown to find out that there's a lot of issues. So like, with that mentality, because like, I'm injecting it into my muscle or my fatty tissue. It's not being like excreted right, or secreted right into the bloodstream, so
right.
There's a lag time. So, timing is important. But also, how you slept that night or how much you've exercised that day all plays into like how much insulin I'm going to give myself. Or, some people have delayed stomach emptying, like gastroparesis. And so that's going to affect the timing and when you need to give things as well.
Okay.
So lots of different things. And so it's really, people come to me and ask me like, what do I do? And it's just like, well, we kind of have to find that out for yourself. I can help you get to that point, but it's like, like what I'm doing may not necessarily work for you because we're at different stages of our type 1. We're at different stages in our health journey. We're at different stages in our life. Yeah. And it's going to change. I mean, I've used multiple different types of insulins just because I was looking for ones that did different things.
Okay.
At certain times. Like at one time I used a fast acting insulin that didn't act as fast, but lasted a little longer than the fastest acting one. Gotcha. At one point I was on an insulin pump. For a long time, I was on an insulin pump, and now I'm back to doing injections because I find that works better. So it's just lots of different things. It's a lot of trial and error with type 1. You really have to know your physiology and that kind of stuff.
Is there, just occurred to me, I don't know why I've never thought about this before. Is it possible for a type 1-2 to become insulin, or sorry, what is a type 1-2? I don't know where I just came with that. Is it possible for a type 1 to become insulin resistant?
Yeah.
Like they have to take more and more and more, right? It seems like, so turning a type 1 into a type 2, then they're screwed. Like what happens then?
You're not turning them into one. They just have both.
Yeah.
Like they're a type 1, so they still have to administer insulin, but they're resistant to that insulin, which is a very real possibility.
Yeah. Wow.
And everybody talks about the fasting insulin level that you want to look at, and most people like the most important number for assessing insulin resistance, and it is. But for type 1, I've gotten many fasting insulin levels on type 1s. It's just not a reliable number because I just don't know. I'm injecting it into my skin. I'm not getting it into the bloodstream, or not getting secreted into the bloodstream. It's just I'm waiting for someone like Ben Bickman to
call
test
you out, Dr. Ben,
to test like, or to tell me like how much does a metabolically healthy person like my same size and everything, how much insulin does their body use? How much insulin does their body make?
Yeah.
I want to know that number so that I can say, okay, how much am I using? Because I really have no idea.
Gotcha.
If I'm having to use more because it's not absorbed as well or something like that.
That would be, that's fascinating. Okay. I never thought about that. Like, because theoretically, if it was average, you should be using the same amount as a normal person, like how much you're creating or how much you're injecting versus how much my body creates.
Yeah.
Never thought about. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
And there's been no studies or nothing that you've been able to find that kind of talks about that.
No, not really. And Ben Bickman does talk about like that instead of having these continuous glucose monitors, we should also have continuous insulin monitors.
Yeah.
But no one's really invented those yet. And that wouldn't really tell you the quantity. I don't know how we would measure how much insulin someone secretes and uses each day.
Oh man.
I don't know if that's even possible.
You know who to talk to. We got to get Feldman on here.
Yeah.
And talk to him. I'm sure he'd figure
something out. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So let's talk about, I know I've seen some stuff recently. You've been talking a lot about cholesterol. Let's just, first of all, let's talk about what is cholesterol for in our body. Why is it even there? What's the existential purpose of cholesterol?
Yeah, well, there's lots of different purposes. And, are we talking about the molecule of cholesterol, or are we talking about lipoproteins that carry cholesterol, and there's lots of different lipoproteins, different sizes of things. But LDL, the lipoprotein, which everybody thinks is evil, or at least everybody's being told it's evil. It plays a lot of different roles. I mean, it helps fight infection, it helps bind up bacteria, things like that. It helps. It's transport for energy. It's transporting cholesterol and triglycerides and fat soluble vitamins and things like that. Because those things can't be transported in the blood without LDL.
LDL. Okay.
LDL is and this is just the carrying molecule, the bus or the boat that carries cholesterol. So it does a lot of different things, but then cholesterol itself is very important because it's the backbone for all of our sex hormones and all of our hormones, really. It plays a vital role in muscle function. It plays a vital role in cellular communication, which we want our cells to be communicating to each other. It's very important. Let's see what else. It plays a role in decreasing inflammation, which is
I was just going to say it's anti-inflammatory, right?
Anti-inflammatory,
and that isn't that the root of arterial blockages? Inflammation, right?
Inflammation, oxidative stress.
It's that whole thing of just because there's firemen in the area doesn't mean the firemen caused the problem.
Right, exactly.
Could you break that down a little bit? Because I've explained it before. Basically, that a blockage is basically a popped zit in the artery. That's kind of how it's like. Sort of. Or like when a clot forms, like when we get that acute clot forming, it's because we have this atherosclerosis and it's the soft plaque, right? That's unstable, meaning it's liable or could break. And if it breaks, that's the pop you're talking about, and that the body sees that. I mean, that's direct damage, and the body clots it immediately. It tries to clot it, and then that clot either clogs the artery right there, or it flows down to a smaller artery and clogs it there. And until the body can, send out, clot busting enzymes and things like that, then it's gonna block it. So, but people think about cholesterol and they think, oh yeah, it's this stuff that sticks to the lining of your arteries and eventually causes this narrowing of the artery and then clogs it. And that's just absolutely not the case. It's just false, completely false. And what happens is we get inflammation and oxidative stress, which is, I tell people that's like an excess free radicals, which are like the Looney Tunes Tasmanian devil. He's going around like crazy, trying to get stuff, and he causes damage in the process, right? That's a free radical. So there's free radicals, there's inflammatory things, and they're causing damage to the lining of the artery. Okay. And it's important to know that damage to the lining of an artery is normal. It happens all the time. And the body is supposed to be able to repair it. Okay. Like that's just the normal wear and tear of being alive. We're not supposed to get excessive damage, but there is some damage going to happen. And if your body can't repair it, that becomes a problem. And the ability of the body to repair it is dependent on insulin signaling. That's growth and repair, right? So the endothelial cells need insulin signaling to repair themselves. And so that's why the kicker is like, we can be in this inflamed oxidative stress state, and that can cause a lot of damage, but the real problem doesn't happen until they become insulin resistant. That's when the body can't repair itself. And so we get this inflammation, we get this damage to the lining of the artery. And short term, the issue with that is that if the damage continues, the artery can rupture. It can break, and that's way more dangerous than a hardening of an artery. So the body decides to, if we don't have insulin signaling and enough repair, the body decides to take cholesterol and minerals and various things. There's even been oxalates, deposited in the lining of an artery, things like that. And it uses that as a spackle to pretty much repair this damage. And so that's why cholesterol is found at the scene of the crime. And everybody's like, oh, look at all this cholesterol lodged into the lining of this artery. It must be the cholesterol. Right.
And that's just not the case. And it's the cholesterol is actually there to help, now that is problematic long-term because you can get stenosis of an artery. So we don't want that. It's not like I'm saying, oh, it's okay to have that cholesterol there. Right.
Well, because you still have the underlying cause, right? There's a reason it's
Okay. So you can treat the cholesterol all day long, and you can lower that and cause side effects in the process, or you can actually address the inflammation and oxidative stress and insulin resistance that's driving the issue.
Right.
But people will say, well, yeah, but oxidized LDL and LP little a and ApoB and all these various forms of LDL are associated with or can prove or can contribute to atherosclerosis. And that's very true. But the things that cause those things are the same things that damage the artery. So the inflammation and oxidative stress are happening.
Mm-hmm.
And they also damage the cholesterol. So we also get
Right.
damaged LDL, we get LP little a, we get all these different things. So we were seeing those at the same time because there's other damage.
And what are those things that cause all this damage?
Yeah. Lots and lots of different things. And so it's psychological stress has been shown to toxin exposure, whether it's heavy metals, plastics, phthalates, all different types of artificial, scents and things like that. All that stuff is like sunscreens, all that stuff is toxic. All the toxins we're exposed to. Poor diet. So, oxidize things that can get oxidized in the body real readily, like seed oils, things like that can definitely contribute to, or glucose-based metabolism, even it's been shown to cause more free radical production, that kind of stuff.
That was one of the things that when I first started researching and doing a lot of my own just learning about this whole thing, this keto carnivore thing, and realizing that, what oxidative stress is and free radicals and how carbs contribute to that, carbs, processed carbs particularly, and all that stuff. It just looking at everything and realizing, like, what you just said is kind of like a double whammy. It's contributing to insulin resistance, but it's also contributing to the stress and inflammation at the same time. So it's like hitting both things at the same time, kind of like, hey, I'm totally going to screw you up,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely the double-edged sword there. So lots of different things can cause oxidative stress. And so it's about eliminating all the ones you can, and not freaking out about the ones you can't at the moment, and just work to getting to that point, because that freaking out about it is just going to cause more oxidative stress,
Yeah, right. Stress is, that's a really good point. Stress is stress, right? Emotional stress, physical stress still creates that a physiological effect of biology.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean,
it's not just what we eat, but our lifestyle and how we think can play a role as well.
Oh yeah. And Bruce Lipton proved this, he proved this, that when our thoughts change, our biology changes.
Yeah.
And we get inflammatory responses. And I'm, working on a presentation now that I'm showing that, people don't understand this, but, people think there has to be like high cholesterol and there has to be like stenosis of the artery, but there are tons and tons of cases where someone has a full-blown myocardial infarction with normal arteries, absolutely normal ones, and a clot forms.
Yeah.
And I'm putting together, the research now and the evidence now that stress, psychological stress, or major stressors that happen are a main trigger of those types of situations.
Yeah.
And
just living a stressful lifestyle.
Yeah. We're not living in a way conducive to our physiology as far as our mental state.
Yeah. And if anybody's not sure, or like going like, how does that even happen? Just think about your day at work, sitting down, not doing anything physical. You've got a healthy diet, and then you're done and you get up to go home and you feel exhausted, you feel stressed out, you feel wore out. Like that's a physical effect of the mental and emotional things you've been dealing with all day, right? You haven't done anything extraneous or super active. Like, it's not like you've been lifting all day long. You've been sitting at your desk all day, right? So, but why are you wore out and exhausted and mentally drained and all these other things, right? That's just a physical representation of what Stephen's talking about.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right. So you're saying that cholesterol is natural. We need it. We shouldn't be avoiding it. So a low fat diet, not eating saturated fats, is probably not the best, right? Because we need that to create cholesterol.
Definitely.
Okay.
Well, the other thing we should say is that it's not just cholesterol that we need, but like the body takes fatty acids that we eat and makes cholesterol. It makes a lot of it, but it doesn't just, that whole process is like 20 different steps of converting different things. That whole process, the point is not just to make cholesterol. There's lots of intermediate molecules that are made during that process that are used for things.
Okay.
For instance, like there's a molecule called dolicol that's made in one of those steps. And it's farnesyl, but then that's turned into dolicol. And dolicol is incredibly important for insulin resistant or insulin sensitivity.
Okay.
for the cells to respond to insulin. So if we're not making cholesterol, like if you're taking a statin drug and you're not making cholesterol anymore, then you're not making farnesyl and you're not making dolichol,
which could worsen your insulin resistance.
Exactly. And that's what the studies show with statins.
Good
And
grief.
yeah. And then there's other molecules that are used to make the internal antioxidants that we make, the selenoproteins that to make glutathione and superoxide dismutase and things like that. So you're going to have more oxidative stress if you don't have those antioxidants.
Right.
And if you're taking a statin drug, you're not going to make those.
And those are directly related to gut health, right? When you talk about glutathione and things like that, because that's where some of that stuff is really applied.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, I mean,
that causes all kinds of other.
Yeah. You have, I mean, people talk about these external antioxidants that you eat in different foods and stuff, but those are nothing compared to the internal ones that your body makes, the liver makes.
Yeah.
So you want to do things that increase the production of internal antioxidants like glutathione, superoxide dismutase, things like that. Those are the heavy hitters that you want. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about ratios and number, because I hear different things. I don't even know what the standard care numbers are right now for the general physician, but what would you say if someone, you were looking at somebody's cholesterol panel, their lipid panel, what are some of the ratios that you look at? I think the biggest one I look at is the HDL and triglycerides being at least 1-to-1, if not HDL a little bit higher. Is there any other things that you would recommend? I don't know if you can recommend, if you would say from what you've seen in your experience works well for people. Yeah.
I mean, when I tell people what they should be tracking for heart disease, first I tell them that, blood tests aren't everything. And that there's no, especially people who are healthy, don't let blood tests tell you that you're not healthy. Like that we get caught up in it a little bit, but important things to track, I guess, are trig to HDL ratio, which I say should be, trig divided by HDL should be 1.5 or lower. Triglycerides themselves should be 150 or lower, hopefully 100 or lower. So those are good ones. But then, outside of a lipid panel, I mean, if you look at the studies on like cholesterol and LDL cholesterol, so total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol, they're associational studies, but if you look at all these studies, they show that total cholesterol levels between 200 and 250 are associated with the lowest all-cause mortality from anything. And if you look at LDL numbers of 100 to 150 associated with the lowest all-cause mortality from anything. And those are above what we're being recommended to have those numbers at.
Right.
Okay. So again, they're just associations, but take it for what it's worth. So if I look at those, if people come in and they're like, oh my gosh, it's over 200. I'm like, well, as long as the trig to HDL ratio is fine, that's where I want it to be.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yep.
So if I look at a lipid panel, that's what I'm looking at. If I'm looking at oxidative stress and inflammation, which are also very important markers to be looking at, high sensitivity C-reactive protein is just a good general marker of inflammation in the body. And I also like the GGT number, which is liver enzyme, that kind of gives you an idea of oxidative stress levels in the liver. So those are the two basic ones. And that's pretty much as far as I go. I mean, you can really get into the weeds testing for inflammation and oxidative stress and measure all these different biomarkers and everything. But in my head, it's just like, let's do things that reduce inflammation and oxidative stress, whether you need it or not, because it's good for you either way.
There's a basic list you can probably low hanging fruit you can probably knock off. And you'll be fine, right?
You don't need to spend thousands of dollars on labs if it's not covered and everything, just to do what I was going to tell you to do, regardless of what your labs say.
Right.
So I think we get caught up in that. I mean, labs can be useful though, because they can be motivators. Like, oh, look how bad this is. Now let's test again. Okay, I'm making progress. That can be motivational. So I don't want to discount them for that. But yeah. And then the other issue the other thing I test with heart disease, the other main thing I think is really important is heart rate variability, which doesn't get talked about enough. And that's just a measure of balance in your stress response. But those are the things, like if I was to dumb it down to like the essential stuff, it's those markers of metabolic health, fasting insulin. I forgot to mention that with the blood work. Fasting insulin, markers of oxidative stress and inflammation, and heart rate variability. Those three things I think are really, really important to be looking at.
Okay, awesome. Let's switch a little bit. We're talking about fatty acids. So let's talk about omega-6, omega-3. You mentioned earlier that seed oils, industrial seed oils, is something that can increase oxidative stress. I think we know that. I hope most people listening to this have at least heard somebody talk about how bad they are, rancid, and all this other kind of stuff. Could you kind of go into, because one of the things that I hear a lot of people saying is that omega-6s are bad. Seed oils have omega-6s, so we shouldn't eat them because they're bad for us. And that's not technically true, right? We do need omega-6s. They are an essential fat. It's just the source makes a difference. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, the source and the stability make the difference, because you can get it in a food where it's stable and hasn't been damaged, like steak, or you can get it in its processed form, like in a vegetable oil, where it has been exposed to high heat, it's been transported in a hot truck, it's been exposed to light, it's been all this stuff, where it's either already oxidized when it gets in your body or goes into your body, or it's easily oxidized once it's in there. Especially if you're in a state of inflammation with all those Tasmanian devil free radicals running around.
Right.
As soon as you ingest that, it's very unstable because it's polyunsaturated and it's going to oxidize very quickly. So that's the issue there. But there's many different ways we can categorize fat. We can do the different unsaturated levels of it: omega-6, omega-3, omega-9, all these different things.
Yeah.
We could do saturated, totally saturated versus unsaturated. We could do plant fat versus animal fat, like cholesterol is animal fat, phytosterol, different types of phytosterols are plant fats. And so everybody focuses on, saturated versus unsaturated, because saturated fat's bad and everything. But this omega-6 versus omega-3, omega-6 is necessary. It's necessary. It's a vital component of our cells, and actually plays a role in when we do need to have an inflammatory response, like when we get an injury or we get an illness or something. We need that inflammatory response. We need omega-6s, but we need them in the forms that they're not going to get easily damaged or already damaged. And so the problem is not omega-6s. The problem is that we're eating way too many, because vegetable oils are very pervasive in our food supply. Gotcha. So the ratio should be like 1-to-1, omega-6 to omega-3, in my opinion. Some people say like 1-to-2 or something like that. But right now it's like 30-to-1 in some people.
It's a lot more to one, right? Yeah.
And there's a study that I talk about in a lot of my talks that shows where they looked at linoleic acid, which is the omega-6 that's in all these seed oils. And they did a biopsy in 1959, and it was like, oh man, it was like, oh man, I wish I knew that. It was like I don't remember the numbers. It went from like this amount of omega-6 percentage of the fatty acids in the cells to this amount. And it was 136% increase from 1959 to 2008.
Right.
So people are eating way more of these, and it's getting stored in our bodies. It's becoming a larger part of our fatty acid components. And they're very problematic because they're very inflammatory. They're very easily oxidized. They are, when we burn polyunsaturated fats for fuel, it's not as efficient as a saturated fat. It does not create satiety. So people keep eating. So they're problematic oils. And I heard it somewhere. I like it that, the more our food should be like whole foods. It shouldn't be these boiled down components of something.
Right.
White sugar, very bad. Carbohydrate in a sweet potato, not as bad, or vegetable oil, it's just straight fat, it's just straight energy, or we can have a steak where there's protein, vitamins and minerals, and energy, right. And we definitely don't want two forms of energy at the same time a lot. We don't want tons of that, like carbohydrates and fatty acids, because while we can eat those foods two foods with different components at the same time, if we have a food that has both of those, which is only a man-made thing, that's a really problematic thing. So yeah, I mean, we can talk about all kinds of stuff when it comes to fats, but I like to also highlight that animals use cholesterol. That's what we use for our fat, what we need for fat in our bodies. Plants use phytosterol. And there are multiple studies that show, lots of them in rats, but one in humans, that shows that phytosterols they jam up things in the body. So if our red blood cells are forced to use phytosterol to build their cell membranes, they become very rigid and not very flexible. And so when they're trying to squeeze through a capillary, that's not a good thing. And there's lots of evidence, mostly in rats, but some in humans, that the more plant sterol you eat, the more plant fats you eat, the more likely you are to have strokes. Because when those red blood cells are trying to squeeze through there and they're very rigid and they can't
block it up,
we get a stroke.
Wow.
Yeah. So interesting stuff. So I hesitate to eat lots of plant fats, for that reason. It's not necessarily about saturated, unsaturated, omega-6, omega-3, whatever. It's maybe plant versus animal too.
Okay. Last fat thing that I've got on my list of things to talk about is triglycerides. You mentioned earlier that there's a role that triglycerides play in energy management, energy transfer. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because, everybody freaks out. Oh my God, I need my triglycerides to be as low as possible. Like, again, I think it's one of those things, like, it's part of our body. It's natural. It needs to be there. There's just things that are about that balance, that homeostasis of where things are supposed to be versus how we're adding to stress and doing things to make things out of whack. So what are triglycerides and where should they be?
They should be in LDL molecules. And then those LDLs are delivering them to cells and tissues and things. If we get free fatty acids in the blood, which you can measure free fatty acids, or triglycerides is another way. I mean, a triglyceride is just a molecule with like this backbone that has 3 fatty acid molecules. It's kind of a storage thing for fatty acids to package them up so they can be delivered somewhere else so everybody can use them for energy and for other things. So when triglycerides are just floating around freely in
without
the bloodstream,
anything attached to them, that's not necessarily a good thing. Now that will happen after you have a meal, but they shouldn't be there if you haven't had a meal. It shouldn't be there long term. They should be used up or packaged up or put into LDL molecules. But if you're fasting and you still have triglycerides floating around freely in your bloodstream, that's an indication that your fat cells are too full and they're overflowing. And they're bulging out fatty acids because they can't store anymore. Now, everyone's fatty acid threshold is different. Yep.
And that's why somebody can be skinny as a rail and be type 2 diabetic, because they're insulin resistant and their fatty acids are spewing out into the bloodstream, right? Causing the insulin resistance. And someone could be really overweight and just not have reached their fatty acid threshold and not be insulin resistant yet. Everybody has that's where genetics does come in a little bit. But yes, you're right. We do need these triglycerides to be for energy, right? We want to make sure we have enough. We want to make sure we're eating enough fats so that we can burn those and teach the body to burn those for energy. But they should, in a normal physiology, they should be mostly within LDL, like packaged up in them. And if we get too many floating around in the bloodstream by themselves, that indicates pathology, insulin resistance. But there will always be some floating around by themselves, but just we shouldn't have too many. Right.
Okay. So triglycerides are basically the transport for the fuel. They hop on board in LDL. That's what takes it kind of everywhere it needs to go. It's like you said, it's like the train that transports the fuel to wherever it needs to go. And if there's too many, that means basically that the LDLs are full, right? The trains are packed, can't fit anymore anywhere else. And now you got all this other stuff just floating around trying to wait in line.
Yeah. Well, it's just like, where do they come from? Because your body's going to put some in the bloodstream, for, different various reasons. It's also going to put some in LDL for delivery of energy and things like that.
Yep.
And that's, the body's going to tightly control that. So if there's more in there that shouldn't be, that's something that's out of the body's control. That's because there's no room to put them anywhere, but their fatty acid threshold is met and they're overflowing.
It's like the New York subway. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So you mentioned before we hopped on here that there is some new information. We're going to totally switch off the cholesterol, fat stuff, and talk about one of my favorite subjects, because I hear it all the time, and it really, I won't say frustrating, but I do find it challenging when I'm talking to people and they're asking about alcohol on keto, particularly because there's a lot of companies out there that claim to be keto friendly wines and all these different things. And I try to explain to them that just because a wine may not kick you out of ketosis doesn't mean that it's benefiting your journey. right? There's things that you're trying to do, and alcohol, no matter what, really isn't going to help that, whether it's keto friendly or not. Can you talk about what this study is? And because that's the other thing too. I think we've heard a glass of wine a day isn't necessarily a bad thing. So there's, again, just another topic where there's 8 million different pieces of information saying all different things. So where are we at with alcohol today?
Yeah. So it's a pretty simple idea in that, alcohol and the consumption of it in moderation, whatever that means, has been normalized, very normalized, and so normalized that people protect it.
Yeah,
they protect it with
a lot.
with it gives you hormetic stress, which means basically that you induce a little bit of a stress to the body, and it rebounds with more antioxidant production, that it ends up being a net positive thing. But there's much more beneficial ways to get a hormetic stress, like exercise, like ketosis, like hot cold therapy, those types of things. So there's that, and then people say, oh yeah, a glass of wine a day, there's polyphenols. Well, in my opinion, the research and the jury's still out on whether polyphenols are that beneficial. Plus, the amount of polyphenols you would have to, or the amount of wine you'd have to drink to get enough polyphenols to make it different, would be you'd be doing way more damage.
That's like these ketone drinks. It's like ketones, get your drink. You gotta drink 12 of them to get enough BHB to do anything.
Exactly. Yeah, but then from a fundamental level, your body takes alcohol and it treats it like a toxin. Yep. It goes immediately to the liver to be detoxified. There's no, it processes it like a toxin. So you're putting a toxin in your body. That's the end of that's it right there. So how could it be beneficial if your body's treating it like we want to get rid of it immediately? Literally, if you drink too much, your body will shut down, pass out, so that your body can get rid of the toxin. Like that in no way that can that be beneficial in my head. And you talk about like, oh, it doesn't kick me out of ketosis. That's fine. And I do understand this aspect of you have to enjoy your life, and I don't know. I just feel like there are better ways to enjoy your life than putting a toxin in your body. And even if you're like, if you have to go get drunk to enjoy your life, then maybe it's time to look for some new friends or something. Yeah. But yeah, this normalization of alcohol is, it bothers me too, because, even in health circles, people go and it's just like, it's so normal, but we're just putting toxins in our body, not just alcohol, but like other toxins that come with alcohol. Sure. Like grains and mold and nitrates and things like that too. So it's interesting, but you started this conversation with this new study that came out just last week, I think it was. It's a very large study. It's like they looked at 1 billion people, but it's associational, but it basically showed that even in moderation, even like a few drinks a week is not beneficial whatsoever. Especially for the age group. I think it was like 19 to 39 or something like that. So in young people. And the study was calling for basically the recommendations are like whatever, how many drinks per week or whatever for people. But it was calling for, a redoing of those guidelines. It's like so many for men, so many for women. I forget what it is, but it's like, we need to redo that because the levels that are harmful are much lower than these recommendations are. That's what the study was calling for based on their data. But yeah, it basically showed that, especially people in that age range, even moderation, which, moderation could be a drink a day or less, is harmful. The higher rates of stroke, cancer, heart disease, brain disease, everything, all-cause mortality in general. Yeah.
I'm sure obesity is on there. I know for me, one of the things that got me really excited about nutrition was I did a 3-week challenge of no alcohol, and I lost like 10 pounds. Yeah. In 3 weeks. I was like, what the heck? That's the only thing I changed. Like, wait a second, what's going on here? So there's definitely something to that.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's huge. Like if you just take, like you said, 3 weeks, a month, something like that, and just don't drink, like just watch your life change. Like you have so much more energy. Yeah. You're so much more productive. You saved money, there's just so many benefits. I mean, and
find out who your friends really are.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. And like I joked to people that, I drank through college and everything, and even through chiropractic school, but I stopped drinking completely when I was in Ireland, which is the place where people are
Yeah, I was
famous
gonna
for
say, that's
drinking or
not the
whatever.
place you think to
And it
stop
was just,
drinking.
funny to me because, I noticed this uptick in production, and then when my brain turned on and everything like that. But it was just funny because it was hard to meet people because, I'd go out and they'd be like, you want to drink? And I say, no. And I say, oh, why not? Like, you sure? Or whatever. And I say, oh yeah, it's just not good for you, or not good for me. And then they're like, oh, with their drink in their hand, like,
Yeah.
you're a jerk, or they're like, oh, he's no fun. He's not going to drink.
Right. Right.
So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So is there anything else you got that you're working on or doing research on that people need to know about, or anything that you want to kind of leave some tips or thoughts for people as they're moving forward?
Well, I guess I'll just kind of right now I'm working on kind of I call it like I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, but it's like this 9-step program to like heart health and just health in general.
Yeah.
And I'm working on that, and it's going to be more instructional rather than like or like, what to do rather than why. But I think I'll leave people with, and this is the kind of the premise of my whole book, is that people talk about diet and exercise, and those are the main 2 components of how people will try and prevent disease or heart disease in general, which heart disease is kind of my thing because I'm type 1 and I'm predisposed to it. But it's way more than that. It's toxin exposure, it's psychological stress. Psychological stress is largely ignored in our society, or it's not ignored, but it's people don't talk about it. It's dental health. How is the health of your mouth?
Oh my God, we got to talk about that sometime.
Yes. Yeah. And which is there's lots of toxic dentistry procedures and things like that. It's so much more than diet and exercise. And I really just want people to realize that. And it's hard too, because people hear that and they're like, oh my gosh, it's so much work. I've got my job. And that's the society we live in, we get really good at one thing, and that's our job. And we get good at that job so that we can make money and outsource everything else we need.
Right.
And that leaves us uneducated about what it does take to achieve health. That's the big one. Just uneducated about a lot of things. Like, I don't know how to repair my car. I'm not the best at it. I can do a few things, but that's about it. But it leaves us uneducated about a lot of things that we need to actually live our life, and health, take care of ourselves is one of them. And we outsource this to this conglomerate of companies that are hospitals and insurance companies and things like that, to tell us what to do to be healthy, and they just don't know. And so that leaves a lot of people confused, and then without the time to actually figure out what it does take, which is why I like doing what I'm doing here, because I'm sharing with people like what I think it does take. And but hopefully, my book and talking to people like you and sharing this information will help people get there a bit sooner. But it's not just diet and exercise. It's not just taking supplements. It's not just those things. You have to really change a lot of things.
Yeah. And what's the name of your book again?
Understanding the Heart.
Understanding the Heart. And that's out. People can get it. And
it's on Amazon. It's on the publisher website. It's Books A Million, Barnes and Noble, wherever. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll make sure to get a link in there when we put all that stuff on there. Awesome, man. Where can people find you if they want to get more information? I know you have a YouTube channel. Yeah, I don't post too much on the YouTube, but my website is resourceyourhealth.com. Okay. And people can contact me there, or on social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. It's just Dr. Stephen Hussey is my handle. And so people can reach out to me there as well. Awesome. Thank you very much for being on, man. I appreciate it. Good stuff. Yeah. Thanks for having me.